think that the timing is really good because hopefully new students won't just stop the practice. They'll take a look at themselves and they'll take a look at the teachers that they're practicing with, and they'll find responsible teachers and ones that really know what they're doing and they're advanced enough to be able to convey that to their students. And I feel that I've been very lucky from the start to have gravitated towards teachers that offer a very therapeutic style. My first yoga teacher had MS, and it was so inspirational to me because I was dealing with a lot of physical, mental, and emotional problems, and yoga has completely transformed my life. And my hope is that new yoga students can find teachers that support them in their journeys.
Talking about this. One of the things that's been really interesting for me going through this whole process and sort of yoga and also doing some personal training as well is I think my two realizations I realized, especially on the teacher side, is that being a teacher, it's hard. It is extremely, extremely hard. Practicing yoga is one thing, doing personal training is one thing, but teaching to other people is a very different experience. And I think the reason why it is because it is one of the most selfless things you can do. It's really not about you at all. It's totally, again, turning back to the ego, not just as a practitioner, but as a teacher, putting yourself fully aside and realizing that this is about someone else. And that's a lot of responsibility, to really be, that's a big, commitment and privilege of someone, giving their body, themselves, their well-being to you. And if you really don't, grasp that and own that fully, then yeah, you are doing them a disservice because, that really is someone else's well-being. And so I think that's one of the things I'm moving forward as a teacher is that you have to always, know why you're doing it and doing it for the right reasons and be extremely dedicated to it. And, like I said, it's constantly thinking, what can you do to improve in a more positive way? What else can you incorporate? What else can you do, not just physically, but nutritionally, body work, and really incorporate all aspects. And so I think those are kind of two things. Just really, it's a challenge. You got to do it and own that mantle. And one of the things that really jumped out at me and was interesting is I do think that these articles are very good. I was at Yale undergraduate this past year, and we had an article that came out by Amy Chu, it was The Hymn of the Tiger Mother, and saying that it prompted firestorm of stuff, but it's a great conversation, and it is sort of a synthesis, and you take things from both angles, from that something higher developed something. So it's this conversation with all the good points.
I remember saying to myself at the beginning of the class, when you set your intention, and I said to myself, I'm going to have fun today. And I'm not going to think about anything other than, am I having fun doing each pose? And it really changed how I felt about, at the end, I felt like I had a great practice, that I wasn't judging, did I do triangle right? Did I do this right? Was I good at this? But I literally, the whole class, I kept saying, just have fun doing this pose, do this pose and have fun. And it was a huge, huge difference. And so now when I practice, I try to do the same thing as opposed to thinking about, am I learning how to do the pose correctly? That I'm here to have fun and enjoy being in my own self and in my body, and for this 1 hour and a half, taking care of myself. And it really changed how I approach my yoga now. I don't get as worked up as I used to. Yeah. It really did change. It really did change how I approach it now.
I actually was bombarded from friends and family about, okay, so why are you choosing this path at this point in your life when it's so hazardous, in response to the article? And I threw it all out to you guys because I was sick of fielding them by myself. But my feeling was the truth is someplace in the middle. With any kind of article that makes news headlines, you have to read it and examine it. And yeah, as David said, you're going to get hurt doing yoga. Ta-da! Prime example, blew out my knee. But you can get hurt playing shuffleboard or playing cards or anything. So I found myself in a defensive mode with people challenging me. Why are you doing something that's so injurious? And I just said it can be, but so can anything. So it almost made me want to recommit to looking at, I'm working with a private client now who has back injury, and I'm more in tune now with her injury and what to do to avoid further complications for her. So it was a positive thing, and I think this dialogue is great. So I just wanted to say thank you for bringing it up, because I kind of threw it out there to you guys because I was tired of taking a defensive mode, and then I realized I don't have to be defensive. The truth is really someplace in the middle.
Maybe speaking to that a little bit around wanting to push yourself a little bit to new places, because that's in some way what you want to do. You want to open yourself up. You want to become stronger. You want to, that's part of the opening. So I'm wondering what that balance is, So don't push yourself at all so you don't get injured. Then that's not the answer either, right?
It's complicated.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna lean towards Barbara on that one, because again, we're talking about if I go on the treadmill for half an hour and then I lift some light weights, I go home, I feel awesome, right? I know I pushed myself, I went for that last rep or something, and it was really fun, and I enjoy the challenge. So we have to ask ourselves, is that yoga or is that exercise, right? And when we're talking about the possible injury field, the yoga is to say, how can I do something that I still feel is challenging, but that I'm absolutely sure, with all of my full awareness about my body, will not hurt me. So when we talk about back safe abs, like where everybody finishes the abs and they go, oh, but nobody feels their lower back, that's fantastic. It's a challenge, but we had our intelligence behind it so that no one had any possibility of risk. So I would say in those circumstances, I know what it's like to take a great power yoga class. Oh my God, I love it, right? But every now and again during those classes, I say, should I take this 10th vinyasa? And I'll say, you know what, I'm not. I'm gonna do a standing forward fold instead. And that's just what we're talking about, that fine line between saying I'm doing this for cardiovascular exercise and for fitness, and then I also need to make sure that I'm listening to my body. Even though it's hot and it's fun, how can I still pay attention to myself?
Close friends and people to yoga, and I think I've exposed a lot of people to yoga, and it's interesting to hear what they have to say afterwards. I think in the beginning they want to do exactly what the person next to them is doing, or they don't feel like they had just a good experience if they didn't do a good enough job. But then I've also heard them say, I really appreciated when Amy Wren said, you're perfect in the pose that you're in. And so that phrase will then carry through with them to other classes, and that sort of, you're perfect just the way you are. And then I've heard opposite experiences where people have been in yoga and they've been yelled at, maybe because of different style, like that where you have to hold a pose in this exact way for this exact amount of seconds. And I say to them, that's not the experience I think yoga is supposed to have for you. And so maybe that's a different style that you could try something different. So it's just been interesting to hear like different experiences around that.
And that's the circumstance where we're lucky again that we have other people to show us how not to behave,
Right.
or how maybe we don't want to behave. I've had a lot of teachers who I really respect and I've absorbed a lot of their teaching, but maybe not their personal mannerisms. I'm like, they're too harsh on their students. I want to be kinder, but that's just me. Like Glenn is no nonsense, and I really appreciate that because I can't be slippery in his class. I can't be in my emotional weirdness because it's like focus. So you have to make that judgment call. What kind of teaching is right for me to be teaching? What kind of teacher is right for me to be studying with? What kind works with my personality? Those are great points. Really.
I would always try to do the hardest stuff, and I had a really hard time coming to terms with where I was physically when I started and accepting myself at that point. And when I stopped performing, because I'm pretty flexible and my limbs hyperextend. When I stopped doing that and I started working towards strengthening my practice got a lot harder and a lot more challenging and actually much more beneficial in the end.
Is that people who injure themselves in yoga, a lot of times it comes from something else that they're doing and then they don't transition your running regimen, your lifting regimen into what you're doing your yoga practice. And one of my first teachers in yoga, she said, you should never change what you're doing in your daily life to optimize your yoga practice. You should throw yourself against the wall in your daily life and use yoga so that you can become better in all the other areas of your life. So that's just viewing yoga more as a rounding out and smoothing out the edges of some of the other things we do day to day, which maybe aren't great for our body or our mind or our spirit.
So you're saying, like, if I had a desk job, that I would want a specific regimen that maybe countered what I was doing with my hands, the carpal tunnel, and then also the seated posture and the forward rounded posture. I want to make something specific to that so that I could go back and do a better job. Right, be more capable.
Be part of the future of yoga, because I spend so much time befriending it, and especially after the article that came out. And the general perception that everyone has to say about themselves, I'm not flexible. You know, and it's just, I'm not flexible. Like, oh no. So, you know, each one person that I'm kind of convinced to try and open their mind to, you know, stretching their bodies. If they're going to run, that's fine. But to complement, you know, with how they're beating themselves up with yoga or with some sort of movement, I'm happy to do that for them because it's amazing to people have so much fear. You know, they've accomplished so much in their lives and they're just full of fear. You know, and it's really not like that. And I'm so excited to be part of being able to have classes.
My first response when we read it was like, oh wow, Glenn Black is getting some credit now. He's been in very early on in my practice. And all of those little remedial exercises he's talking about, I still do every single morning. And that's what got me able to do a more advanced practice. Because for years, all I did, I never tried handstands or anything like that for years and years and years. I just did seated postures with the shoulder strap opener for like 20, 30 minutes. And then I did different exercises like that. And it really did help. There wasn't any kind of ego involved in it. And he talked a lot about the Satguru, the inner teacher, and listening that that's the most important voice.